Welcome to the Fit Dad Nation podcast, forging strong fathers and raising a stronger generation. It's time to get up or shut up with your host, Steve Roy.
Hey guys, this is Steve Roy, the host of the Fit Dad Nation podcast. Welcome to the show and thank you for listening. So before I introduce today's guest, and I'm really honored to be talking with him today, I just want to take a quick moment to invite all you dads who are listening right now and who are ready to start taking action on reclaiming your health and fitness and becoming better fathers and better men to join our online community. And the best way to do that is to head over to Facebook and apply to our private group, which is the Fit Dad Basecamp, which is facebook.com/groups/Fit Dad Basecamp. So, today my guest is Lieutenant Larry Yatch. Larry is a retired Navy SEAL and the founder of Sealed Mindset, which he and his wife Ann created in 2008 after he was medically discharged from the Navy after being critically wounded. So he's a speaker, he's an entrepreneur, and after listening to some of his shows, seeing him on YouTube and kind of hearing his message, I'm just blown away. Not only at his experiences, but his ability to take some of his past failures and turn them into just incredible successes. So, Larry, welcome. Thank you so much, not only for your service, but for being here with us today.
It's my absolute honor. So I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. So I know you teach a number of different things through some of your programs and courses, and today I'd kind of like to focus on maybe the mental aspect of what you do, what you teach, and specifically how it relates to us as dads and as well as how it relates to our kids. So, I've got a bunch of questions, a bunch of stuff I want to talk to you about. I want to pick your brain. You've got such great insight on so many things, and what you do is really, really impressive. But before we get into all that, I want to hear your story about, what you've went through to kind of end up where you're at today.
Yeah. So that could take our full
yes.
interview time if we wanted to. So I'm gonna do some highlights and then the opportunities that you probably heard some more in the other stuff that you've heard. So if there's anything I missed that you think would be applicable, please just stop me and tell me to cover that stuff up. I'll gladly do that. I always start this the same way. It's all my life today is all started by a great American, Tom Cruise, and a amazing movie called Top Gun. So I was in third grade and went to see Top Gun with my family, and before the movie was over, I was 100% convinced, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that I needed to be a fighter pilot. That was it. And soon thereafter, my dad showed me The Right Stuff, which was all about the test pilots and astronauts. And the coolest characters in that all went to the Naval Academy. So before I was done with third grade, I was 100% convinced I was going to go to the Naval Academy and be a fighter pilot. And I started literally at that point in time, once I made that decision, I started working on that path, all the way back in third grade, and started working through it. And obviously that's not normal. And I think one thread that you're going to see throughout this entire conversation is I am not a normal person in any way, shape, or form. And ultimately, I love that because normal and exceptional, they don't intersect. If you're normal, you can't be exceptional. You can't do something exceptional. You can't live an exceptional life. And being able to have someone see me as abnormal means that I've got potential to do something great. So that theme will be consistent throughout this conversation.
Okay.
Once I got to be another great American, then changed my life. Charlie Sheen came out with a movie called Navy SEALs when I was in 7th grade. And I was too young to see the movie, so I didn't see the movie, but my friend got me a sweatshirt that said Navy SEALs on it for my birthday. And back then, this would have been in the late 80s, no one knew what a Navy SEAL was. And even with all of my military interest, never even heard of a Navy SEAL. So I went to the library and found a book called The Men with Green Faces. And it was, at that time, there was very few books out from SEALs. This was fiction-based book that was based on reality, but fiction. It was about the Vietnam War. And by the end of the movie or book, I was convinced that fighter pilots were pansies and I needed to be a Navy SEAL. The problem is I was anything but what you would consider to be SEAL material. In high school, I was 5'2", 107 pounds. If it had a ball or a team, I was useless at it. I studied I'm smart, but not smart enough to get good grades without a lot of work. And since I had this goal of going to the Naval Academy, I always put a lot of effort into studying. Your good old classic American little skinny dork. And being in high school in a city in Pittsburgh with that type of makeup meant that I wasn't the most popular kid. There's a lot of bullying through middle school and high school. And ultimately, that bullying is what gave me the ability to be a SEAL, being able to have the self-regulation not to fight and cry and scream all the time, as well as the drive to stop bullies, because that's what SEALs do. Anytime that there's someone with power that uses it to hurt others that don't have it, that's a bully. And our job as a SEAL is to go hunt and stop the worst bullies in the world. So I was set on doing that. Got into the Naval Academy, and then through the 4 years there, had to compete with some of the best people in the country for a very limited number of chances to go to SEAL training. And I was able to secure one of those. And in the fall of 1998, went off to Coronado and entered into SEAL training. I graduated in April of 99. And from there, and this is also kind of an interesting thing that would have some applicability to your audience. So here's a kid that had never been anything better than mediocre in any sport that he did. You know, and most of them I was horrible at. And in high school, I would join any sport that would let me, because I was just trying to pad my resume. So mediocre at best. And when I say at best, I remember my first cross country race. I got lost and had to take a cab back to the starting line. I mean, we're talking bad.
Wow.
If you see me throw a ball, it's humorous in any way, shape, or form. So I go from that to I graduated in the top 3 of my SEAL training class. So what was the difference between a kid that, can't dribble a basketball, was tied into knots in wrestling, almost drowned in swimming, got lost at a cross country race, to being in the most intense physical training in the world and graduating at the very top? And the difference there is passion and purpose. When it came to the cross country race, I didn't have any passion for running. The only purpose I had for even running was to put it on my resume so that I could get to achieve my dream. But once I got into a physical activity that was my passion and fulfilled my purpose, my performance went through the roof. And that same principle applies to anything that we do. If you're trying to force yourself to perform at something that you have no passion about and you have no purpose in doing, good luck.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel the exact same way. And I think that's one of the main reasons why so many people fail in fitness. And, it seems like everybody wants to lose weight, right? I mean, that seems like a very common denominator. And the big reason is most people don't have the purpose, right? There's no why. Like, it's not deep enough, or they haven't discovered really the deep emotional connection of why is so important for them to be in a certain shape, certain weight, certain size, whatever it is. And it's huge. I mean, you have to dig deep in a lot of cases to find that. But I want to hear your story, because I heard it before and it's fascinating. And it'll lend to this story. But how you went from, I guess, 1,000, 1,200 guys in your Naval Academy class to 200 of those trying to vie for 15 spots at a SEAL team, right? I mean, or buds rather. That's those numbers are correct.
Yeah. So it was we had 12,000 applicants for my Naval Academy class. 1,200 got in. So we went from 12,000, 1,200 just to get into the school. So when you get there, you're surrounded by 1,200 of the best and brightest. And the difference between, say, going to Harvard. So I think the year I got in, the Naval Academy was the third hardest school to get in, behind like Harvard Law and Yale Medical School.
Mm-hmm.
It's was one of the most challenging, just based on numbers. But one of the reasons it is more challenging than just, say, a Harvard is the Naval Academy is looking at more than just grades. Right. Mm-hmm. Ultimately, if you're really, really smart, and you have really good grades, and you do well on the standardized test, you can get into the really good schools. That isn't just having good grades is not going to get you into the Naval Academy. So when you get there, those 12,000 that get there, they're solid on every level. And they're solid on the fitness level. They're solid on school. They're solid on community service. They're solid on extracurricular activities. So you're dealing with a really well-rounded person. And then at that start of the class, and now this I have to estimate, right? I don't know for sure, but there's about 200 out of that 1,200 that had some designs on being a SEAL. And over the 4 years, that gets whittled down, especially as you get closer and closer to it, you get more realization of what it actually means. That got narrowed down to 54 that were actually medically qualified and kind of met the minimal standards to then compete for 15 spots. So we went from 12,000 to 1,200, 1,200 to 200, 200 to 54. And those 54 were the best the Academy had to offer. Like, we're talking the captain of the wrestling team, the captain and co-captain of the football team, the captain of the water polo team. We had a swimmer that had qualified for the 200-meter breaststroke in the Olympics. Captain of the gymnastics team. You know, when we were doing our physical fitness test, he did 75 dead hang pull-ups in a row.
What?
Like, yeah, exactly. And non-kipping dead hang pull-ups in a row. And that's after doing 2 minutes of push-ups and 2 minutes of sit-ups, where he would have done well over 120. So more than one push-up a second for 2 minutes straight. That's after swimming a 500-meter side stroke in most likely 7 or 8 minutes. This physical skill and conditioning is insane. So we're talking the best and brightest. We had a Rhodes Scholar who was going off to England to study at some amazing school over there before he went off to the Naval Academy, or went off to Bud. So we're talking the best and brightest. That's the 54. Any one of those 54 guys would have gone to Buds and kicked butt. And of those 54, only 15 got a spot. And that competition was threefold, because it's holistic. Buds isn't physical. It is physical, but that isn't the core of it. It's just as trying emotionally as it is mentally, as it is physically. And so they assess you on all three: mental, physical, and emotional. On the mental level, they're assessing you based on your performance in school, which is ranked from the first day you show up to the last day you leave. And in the Naval Academy, you're not ranked solely on academics. You're ranked on your academics, your military performance, and your peer reviews that you get every semester from your first semester in. So you're being ranked on all of that. You have a physical test. So the SEAL PST was 500 meter breaststroke, 500 meter side stroke. You get out of that, you immediately go into 2 minutes of push-ups, 2 minutes of sit-ups, and then as many pull-ups as you can do without letting go of the bar. And then from there, you immediately go outside and do a 1.5 mile run in boots and long pants. And they take the seconds, the number of seconds of your swim, the number of seconds of your run, and they take 2 times your push-ups, pull-ups, and sit-ups and subtract those 2 numbers. And then they just rank you 1 to 54. So that's physical. And then emotional, you go through a board. So they take, I think we had 12 SEALs from senior enlisted to a very senior officer, all, very experienced SEALs. They sit in a room. You get to sit at the end of the table, and depending on the interview, it goes anywhere from 1.5 hours to close to 3 hours. And what they're doing is emotionally testing you, right? They're going to push you and pull you in every direction they can, and they assess you from 1 to 54. So you get ranked on the mental side, the physical side, the emotional side, and they only take the top 15.
Oh, man, that's nuts. So my question is then, these are all guys you're up against. These are studs, right? The cream of the crop. They ruled their high schools. But how did you get in? I mean, from what you've said, it doesn't sound like you were even a good athlete at all. You were small. I know you went through a period where you were, in a lot of fights and defending yourself because you were bullied a lot. But how did you get selected to the Naval Academy based on, what you said? I mean, were you like a really good student and doing lots of stuff outside of the classroom?
So I would say I was better than average in everything. And I had a lot of everything. And so that's where I had strength, right? So I've never been the best at anything, but I've always been better than most. And so when you look at that in a cumulative manner, like I didn't get a 1600 on my SATs, but I got a 1400. So that's really good, but there's a lot of people that get really smart people get a lot better than my grades were, better than most, but I wasn't the valedictorian. In my sports, so I was never a standout athlete in anything, but I wrestled, I swam, I dove, I ran track and cross country and did pole vault. I did a whole lot. And then when it came to extracurricular activities, if they had it, I did it, and I did it with my full ability. So I was part of the poetry club on the yearbook committee. I could care less about poetry or the yearbook. I just did it because I knew it would help, and it gave me more experience, more things to put down. And I didn't just mail it in. Like, it wasn't like I showed up on the poetry club and just sat there in the corner so I could put it on my resume. I wrote poetry as hard as I could possibly do it. I just wasn't very good at it. And so that ability to actually have, better than average results in such a broad range of things is where I think that's why I got picked. And I would have probably gotten picked in the middle. Like, I wasn't their first pick and I wasn't their last. I was probably, just above average in the overall scheme of it. And it was the same thing at Buds. Showing up at Buds, the only thing that I was at the very top of was the obstacle course. And that's what I've found has been key for me. If it's a physical activity that is odd, I'm really good at it. Like skydiving, skiing, water skiing, snowboarding, kite surfing. Give me something crazy that most people can't do, and I excel at it, especially if there's significant risk to doing it. And so it's the traditional sports that I wasn't very good at. So when I got to Buds, the obstacle course, I kicked butt in. I was always in the very top of that. I was never the fastest, but I was in the top 3 or 4. When it came to everything else, I was just, I'd finish in the top 20% all the time, every time. So when you get to the end of it and you add in that cumulative performance, that's how I ended up at the very top of the class. But I wasn't the honor man. I wasn't the best, which has pretty much been my story.
Wow, that's interesting. So I know you had a number of missions, and I've heard you tell the story about the one with the oil field out in the middle of the ocean, which is a fascinating story. And then you were injured, which I have not heard the story of how you were injured, but I know it led to you basically being medically discharged and creating this business with your wife, Sealed Mindset, as a way to continue on this mentality and helping people in a way that you know how to help people, but you're doing it now from a computer and in person versus out on the battlefield. And so, I want to hear about a couple of things first. So I want people to understand what you do. So, I had done my homework. I had figured out what you did for a living. I had heard a bunch of your interviews. And then before we started recording, you said, yeah, that's changed. We've sold off a lot of that stuff. We've moved. A lot of this stuff is gone. So I would like to hear, what your business is now.
Definitely. The best way I can go into that is talking about the breakdowns in my life that resulted in the change. And the reason I think that's important is I expect that these breakdowns are going to resonate with the listeners, because what I know for sure is I'm not alone in the problems that I was facing. And I think starting there will help give some grounding as to then the changes, because if I went straight into the changes, as our earlier conversation said, is kind of a shock. It doesn't make a lot of sense. But I think viewing it through the breakdowns that caused it will have it make a lot of sense. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely.
So as we kind of established already, I would say that I'm an above average performer. And what I mean by that is not necessarily the results I got, but just my drive, right? I'm driven to work hard. I'm driven to try to do well in just about anything I do. And I would call that a high functioning individual. And there's a lot of us out there that aren't necessarily seeing the results, right? Like, you can be a high functioning person, someone that works hard in just about anything they do and still not necessarily see the results. And so it's more of a mindset than it is a description of your, let's say, environment or your results. And by being a high functioning individual, we've been conditioned at a very young age to believe a big old lie. And this starts really the first time we get into school. And the lie that they tell us is that if you work hard today, you're going to have a better future. You're going to get something you want in the future. And you can think about this like, as a young kid, it's springtime, you've got a test tomorrow. So you're sitting there and you need to study for that test, but your friends are out having fun on their bikes. You really want to go outside, but if you don't go outside and you sit and study, you're going to get a good grade. And if you get a good grade, then you're going to get recognition from your parents, from the teachers. And if you get enough good grades, then you're going to graduate at the top of the class and get into a good school, a good high school. And then when you graduate, do well there and get a good high school, you're going to get into a good college. And if you study really hard and do well and make sure that you do the important hard things and resist the temptations to have fun, to have enjoyment and fulfillment, that you're going to get a good job. And if you get a good job, then if you work really, really, really hard, you're going to get promoted. And if you get promoted, you're going to make more money, which means you can buy some more stuff finally. And someday you're going to be able to retire on the beach in Florida and play golf. And then you get there, retire on the beach in Florida and play golf, and you find out you hate golf and you're unfulfilled. And that core message, what's there, the fundamental thing that's at work there is this concept that our lifestyle, the daily experience that we have, if we put our environment in front of that. So if you look at that classroom, the teacher, the test, the grade is environment, right? That's external. And if we restrict our lifestyle, our daily experience, right, don't have fun, study instead, we're reacting to our environment. And our environment dictates our lifestyle. Now, that same theme in every example I said exists, right? If I'm at work and I'm doing a job I don't enjoy, I'm not fulfilled in, as long as I work hard enough, as long as I persevere today, I'll get a reward or a treat tomorrow. It'll pay off tomorrow. Again, my experience, my lifestyle is being dictated by my environment. Whenever we are in that place, we can't be fulfilled as a human being. It can't happen, because fulfillment is all about taking control of our environment, not responding to it. And that's why you get men that are objectively, if you look at them from the outside, you can point to how successful they are, yet they're extremely unhappy and unfulfilled. They're not connected in their relationship. They're not experiencing the adventure of life with their families. What they're doing is working really hard, hoping that someday it finally feels good. And that's where my wife and I were in spades. She is as impressive as me. She has a master's from Georgetown in international security and anti-terrorism. She worked for the Defense Intelligence Agency while I was out on the front line. So she had the same model. And when we got together, it got worse, right? We put everything into our business with the concept. Like if you ask us, how's it going? We would say it's rough, but in 6 months, it's going to be better. And that went on for 10 years. And every day it got a little bit worse. We got a little bit more disconnected as individuals. We were in more conflict as a couple. And the worst part, what just ate away at my soul, was I was watching the days slip by of not seeing my boys, not connecting with them, not being able to teach them, not being able to experience life with them, also that I could have the money to buy them something and let them be in the best daycare. And what killed me was, holy shit, I'm doing the same thing to them that happened to me. Because put them in a really, really good daycare. What's the daycare going to teach them? Same thing it taught me. Persevere today, you'll get a treat tomorrow. And that's when we decided to change everything, because we knew that those patterns were so deep in us that if we didn't make a major change, we're going to be on this downward slope till there was significant consequence. And so that was the crux of our realization, and when we decided to make big changes in our lives. Before I go into the changes, I'm interested to hear how all that kind of falls on you.
So, yeah, I mean, it falls hard because I feel so strongly about what you just said. And I mean, you have a massive undertaking if you're trying to change what we've been conditioned to believe. And I think it's complete bullshit. I mean, like you just said, we're conditioned a certain way. We think that we have to get good grades to get into a good school, to get a good job, to make more money, to sit in front of a computer and stare at a screen for 8 hours a day for 40 years, get a gold watch, retire, and die. That's no way. I mean, that is that's my nightmare.
Oh my God. Yeah.
That's my nightmare.
I got this sick feeling in my stomach and almost start to physically shake when you go through that, because it hits me so hard of how your life will literally waste away and it'll be gone. And the worst part is, in my old life as a SEAL, I know, I know how fragile life is, how, and this was a hard thing for me to accept as a SEAL. What kept me from being traumatized in some of the world's worst environments, in some of the most dangerous things, was my perception that I could make a change. Like I could influence change. Like I was going to win because I had the ability. Now, what struggled when we get into combat, what had that perception change, was the fact that I saw how there is no ability to control if you live or die. Like you can influence it some, but you can't control it. There is so many times that if I would have been standing 6 inches to the left or 6 inches to the right, 6 inches forward or 6 inches back, I'd be dead. And there's nothing I could do about it. No amount of training, no amount of knowledge, no amount of skill would have precluded me from not being here, simply because I stood in the wrong place. So when you now add this knowledge of the fragility of life on top of what you just said, that means I could be in the middle of the depths of the doldrums trying to earn that watch and retire and be on the golf course when I get hit by a bus and it's all over. And the hardest part, and that's what I can't wait to share next, is, well, then what the hell do we do about it? Because like you said, we've been conditioned since we entered into the classroom to act like this.
Yes.
And it is in every part of our being.
It is. And I just want to share just a quick story. I grew up like you. I was a twerp, a skinny twerp. My nickname was Stick Man. I was picked on. I had these couple bullies that ruined my entire middle school experience. High school wasn't much better. I didn't go to prom. I didn't date. I was totally dorky all through high school. Never played any sports. I played video games. And
we would have been friends, so at least we have that.
Yes. So my father was a PhD. He was a researcher and professor at UCLA. He was really big on education. He said, listen, I'll pay for your college anywhere you want to go if you can get in. My grades weren't great either. And I said, hell no, I am not going back into any type of formal schooling. Not going to happen. So I almost joined the Army. I pushed out at the last minute when the recruiter came to my house, finally, after taking the ASVAB and everything. And I said, you know what, I'm just going to actually do what I want to do. I'm not going to continue to put myself in a situation where I'm absolutely miserable because I hated school. I traveled the country for 10 years. I picked up, sold everything I had. I would move to a new city, start over with no friends. I loved it. Did it for 10 years. And then I turned 30. I was still waiting tables and bartending. And I said, I need to get a real job here. So I took a job in what someone would consider a good profession. It was the finance industry. I became a stockbroker, got all my licenses. And then for the next 11 years, I was miserable. I mean, I hated it. It looked great on paper. I wore nice suits. I got paid good money.
Oh, yeah.
It was prestigious.
People pointed at you and said, I wish I could be like Steven. I wish I could have what he has.
Yes, and I loved it. I worked for big companies, Merrill Lynch before it went under, Morgan Stanley. And so I felt like a big shot, but I hated getting up and I hated going to work. And so, and that was it. So what I did was I started writing on a website, a blog that I created, basically journaling how this was so wrong to be trapped in a life that you didn't want to be trapped in. And I felt completely stuck. I had a wife that stayed home with the kids. I had 2 little girls. And so I was stuck. I couldn't just quit. And so I started writing from my heart with passion, and the website blew up. Within a few months, I had 20,000 visitors a month. I had
that's amazing.
All kinds of stuff going on, and people were like, holy shit, this is my life. And so when you told that earlier, that it's so powerful, and life is so short. You cannot spend it doing what we're conditioned to do. And so I'm fascinated about what you're going to tell me here in a minute about how you're actually teaching the exact opposite of what we've been learning.
Yeah. So now this kind of brings it back to full circle. So what do we do now? What we did was we had a business that did personal safety, self-defense, and it was a holistic training for families in fighting, fitness, and firearms, situational awareness, the full gamut. We had a 10,000 square foot facility with a live fire shooting range where we trained on average 140 individual classes every month. Now, what that enabled us to do, and this is the other cool part, I didn't teach any of the classes. So I had to create curriculum that enabled instructors to teach complex, high-risk stuff to people that had no background and no experience. So the ability to do that was about understanding behavior change. Because what kept me safe as a SEAL was not my ability to shoot, it was my ability to avoid a fight that I wasn't going to win. And the ability to avoid a fight I'm not going to win is about seeing the world a certain way and moving through it in a certain way. So I knew that's what kept people safe. And that's behavior, right? Our ability to see the world is based on our mindset, and our moving through that world, our actions are based on our behavior. So I decided to become an absolute expert at behavior change. And in order to understand the fundamentals of neuroscience and adult education, learning, all of that stuff gave me this amazing background in being able to change and modify behavior, which we then applied into school systems, developing curriculum for anti-bullying, but we took it through the approach of leadership, of being able to fill the void that bullying grows in by teaching the kids how to lead, how not to be reactive to their environment. Again, behavior change. And then we started getting interest from parents saying, hey, I just read my 5th grader's lesson on communication. It's the best thing I've ever read. Would you come teach my executive team how to communicate, because they're worse than 5th graders? So that started the 3rd company. And what were we doing? Behavior change again. So we've got this huge 10 years of experience, and literally we have over 40,000 kids that have gone through our middle school and high school programs. We have directly taught probably close to 100,000 people over 10 years. And so we've been doing all this success, right? Objective success. Merrill Lynch, Morgan Stanley, people looking at us, holy crap, look at them. Miserable, right? Absolutely miserable. So what we did, which makes me laugh and feel like an idiot at the same time, we applied the same tools that we've been using for 10 years to change people's lives and just pointed it at ourselves, saying, okay, we now see the problem. The problem is we react to our environment. We let our lifestyle be dictated by the environment that we're in, and that doesn't work. We want it to be the opposite. What would it look like if we put 100% focus on designing, and here's a key word, a sustainable daily experience that we want? And the sustainable is a key part, because you can have a daily experience that's amazing, right? It's called vacation, right? It's amazing, but it's not sustainable to be on vacation for the rest of your life. So how can we design, if we put a focus on creating and designing a sustainable daily experience that's unbelievably positive, connecting, and for us, adventurous, and then we only allow an environment that supports it as opposed to fights it. Literally just switching the direction, right? Instead of responding to our environment, we are going to create and design an environment that supports the lifestyle we want. That was the first crux of a lesson, right? And you can see, if your listeners do nothing but this, anywhere you feel stuck, anywhere you feel unfulfilled in life, anywhere you feel pain, resistance, depression, anything, all you have to do, I guarantee this, you are responding to some part of your environment. Like that drives it. That is going to be the core of it, of any of it. And so just that alone is worth listening to this podcast, right? Just being able to say that wherever I feel stuck, I can start saying, where is my environment kicking my ass? Because that's what's driving that feeling. That alone is useful, but we're going to go, I'll give you more. So for us, we said, okay, what behavior change tools do we need to be able to re-engineer our lifestyle and actually engineer it? We are going to design our lifestyle. We are not going to respond to our environment. And that fell into three categories. First one was our habits. So subconscious choices. Our subconscious choices are the neural pathways, the patterns that we've established over time, where an environmental cue triggers one of these patterns we've already established, and we take an action without conscious thought. That's a habit. And the key part of that is that our habits are driven by our programming, right? Our neural pathways and our environment. So if I want to change my habits, I have to change my neural programming, or I have to change my environment. Changing your neural programming is hard. Changing your environment can be pretty easy, right? Like if you want to stop drinking beer every night when you feel unfulfilled, don't have any beer in your house, right? You can either use perseverance to look at the beer and choose not to do it, or I can just change my environment and not have any beer in my house. Now, if I keep all beer away from me for 2, 3, 4 months, what am I doing? I'm reestablishing or reprogramming my neural pathways. Therefore, I can reintroduce beer into my environment. It doesn't matter anymore. So that's the first step. We started by saying we need to systematically change our environment to change the habits that we had that were disrupted. For example, just to make this real, when I would get stressed from work or from anything, I would isolate myself. Like I didn't want to interact with my wife or kids. So we lived on a lake in Minnesota. I would go in the lake. I'd either go jet ski, or I'd go swim, or I'd go kayak or paddleboard. Whatever I would do it alone. And when I would get home, I would eat dinner. And then instead of the connecting with my wife by going to bed together, I would sit and watch TV until 2 a.m, get a headache. And those were not, they fulfilled my need to isolate, but not habits I wanted to create. So we decided to change our environment. And we knew that if we changed our environment, but had it be set, we would just go back to our same habits. So the rules we made were nowhere longer than 6 months, nowhere we have to own anything, and only places that we choose based on the experience it offers the family. And so we've moved 4 times in the last 8 months with a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. And what we found is by the second move, so we removed the lake, but we had TV. So now I was no longer going and isolating myself on a lake, but I was still watching TV. The next move, we had no lake, and the only way I could do physical activities that I enjoyed, skiing, I only had 1 car. My wife had to take me to the mountains. So in order to actually go and do something active, I had to connect with my wife just to get there. And we had no TV. Now we have a TV and an ocean, and I no longer isolate myself when I get stressed. I connect with my wife because I created an environment where those patterns were reestablished. I'm going to stop there just to see what you think.
So, those are the extremes, right? So most people aren't going to take those extremes or feel like they can't, right?
Definitely not.
Let's take, for example, your average guy, right? Let's call him Chris. He's 40 years old. He's got 3 little kids, a wife. So he's got an hour commute each way. He's miserable at his job. By the time he gets home, he's exhausted, right? So he's got to, have dinner, whatever his wife cooks, right? And his lunch was, he ate out with his peers, and breakfast was a cup of coffee and a donut. And then, so he's got a couple hours with his kids. He crashes, maybe watches a little TV, crashes, and repeats, right? And he's dead inside, really. I mean, he's just going through the motions of life. I've been there. I've seen it. I see it all the time in my community. So those people, and like me, feel stuck, trapped, whatever you want to call it. So what would you tell somebody that, in their mind and in my mind, like I couldn't make those changes. I felt powerless almost against, well, I've got to go to this job and it's an hour away. So, I've got to deal with this commute and I have no time for lunch. So, or I have no time for breakfast. So I'm just eating something quick on the fly. And, I have to go to lunch with my buddies because we're talking business. And, and so where do you start with somebody like that? Obviously they're not going to sell their house, move away, move closer, whatever. Let's say those things are off the table. They're just getting by financially.
Well, okay, so let me just stop you there for 2 things. So one of my superpowers is precision of language. So I pay very, very close attention to the words that we use because they're extremely telling and they're not by accident. And so I'll hear things that are probably not conscious that you're saying. So the first one is I can't, a whole bunch of I can'ts. Like he can't move, he can't change jobs, he has to do a commute, he has to. That is the crux of the problem, in that he is responding to his environment and therefore feels stuck and unfulfilled. So now I want to be very, very, very clear with this. I'm not professing that the answer to everyone's problems is to sell all your stuff and go on a worldwide venture with your family. I'm not saying that. But what I wanted to poke at a little bit is why can't everyone do that? And now why I'm saying that is if you can't sell everything and go on the road, you also can't get a new job. You can't wake up earlier and have breakfast, right? You can't have a bike at work that you go for a bike ride at lunch. Like you could put I can't to every one of those little things if you can put I can't to I can't move. So why is there I can't?
I think it's a conditioning thing, but a feeling of it's a feeling of being stuck. You're settled into this life, and maybe you don't know any better. You don't know how to get out. Like you feel stuck. Right.
And so from your perspective, what do you think the hardest part of my wife and I grew up living in the same house our entire lives. Till college. So we did not grow up like, in a hippie commune moving, on a VW bus. Like we were as traditional could be. I have only lived in 2 houses, I think my entire, 3 houses. My house growing up, the Naval Academy, and then really 2 houses in San Diego. So I didn't live like this, nor did she. What do you think the hardest part of this entire experiment has been?
For you?
Or for the family? Let's just say for my wife and I, because my kids are along for the ride.
Adapting to change.
That's what you would think, like adapting to some change. Like you might say that it's having to figure out where the daycare is or this or that.
There's no stability. No. Yeah, it's completely flies in the face of what you've known.
I would think. I would have agreed with you beforehand. I would have said that's going to be the problem. That's going to be the hardest thing. By far, the hardest thing in this entire experiment was choosing to do it. And I want that to settle in. Like making the choice to do this was by far the hardest thing. As soon as we made the choice, guess what? Everything was normal. human beings are adaptive engines, right? That's why we still exist on this planet. We are designed to have resistance to change, but be able to change anything. And you've seen this in the fitness space, right? People show up, the model of unhealth, and end up being the full rock star, right? Mentally, physically, and emotionally through hard work and change. So we as human beings are designed to adapt, but also designed to resist adaptation to conserve energy. So we've got this tension between being able to change anything and not wanting to change anything. So for us, as soon as we decided that this is what we were going to do, that choice, that unbelievably difficult choice, everything, it just became normal. Like everything becomes normal. Like it became normal that we were the first, so we had a 5-bedroom house full of stuff, just like everyone else. Guess what the first thing to sell was? 6 months before we were supposed to leave. Our bedroom furniture. So 6 months before we were leaving, we had a mattress on the floor and all our clothes piled up in piles around our empty bedroom. Like, and that became normal. It's not what I would have chosen. Like, I would have chosen that to not happen, but in the same respect, it didn't cause, after about 2 days, it didn't cause us any stress anymore. So when we say we can't, right, the hardest part is making the choice to can. After that, it's a matter of taking steps, having some failure, learning from that failure, and taking some more steps, which as human beings, we're designed to do on a neuroscience level, where it's neuroplasticity, right? We are designed to do that. On a physical level, we're designed to adapt to anything. Look at the people that lose a leg and what they can do adapting from missing a part of their body, right? And performing still at an extremely high level. So the hardest part of any of this is the choice to change I can't to I can, because that's where all the risk is.
So if it was the hardest thing for you by far, you coming from a field where everything is based on decisions, choosing, you're in a leadership role. I mean, you're head and shoulders above the average person as far as those things. And that was an extremely difficult thing for you. How difficult does that make it for someone like me or just a regular dude to make that decision where my life hasn't revolved around those life or death situations, and you have to boom. It's all about decisiveness, right? I've never really lived that way, and so for me, choosing something like that would be almost, in your mind, like it's just not going to happen. So,
well, what I want to, again, I'm going to bring you back to, I'm not saying that everyone could sell everything they want and go on the road, but I'm saying that in your story of, I think Chris was the guy's name that we were talking about. You said he can't, or I can't, right? 4 or 5 times about 4 or 5 different things, of which you or Chris completely has the ability to make the decision to say, I now can. Like, I can find another job. I can eat breakfast. I can, I forget what the other ones were, but simply by making the choice to say, I can wake up 10 minutes earlier and have breakfast, or I can eat breakfast now. How could I do that? How can I do that where it's not a pain in the butt? Well, maybe I make my breakfast the night before and have it in the fridge. So all I have to do is walk by the fridge and grab the bag and eat it in the car on the way to work. I mean, that's why simply starting with I can, and the first part that I can, this is another hugely powerful thing that you've already mentioned. You already brought this up, was that without purpose, you can't do anything. So the first part of this whole thing is having a very clear picture of the future that you want. Right, understanding that your desired end state. So what's my desired end state? What would the future feel like if I took care of my health in the morning by eating breakfast? If I'm not clear on that, good luck getting anything done. So first we really want to get clear and connect to the purpose, the reason why we're doing something, so that when it becomes challenging, we have the power to keep doing it. From there, then it becomes tactical. right? It literally becomes, what are some options? Let me try a couple options and start putting them into place. The last part of this is we as human beings are insufficient by ourselves. There is no one that I know of that lives on this planet alone with no reliance on anyone else. Even the people that live out in the woods still use a piece of metal that someone else made or a piece of clothing that someone else made, right? No one goes out into the jungle naked and afraid and lives there forever by themselves. So we as human beings are insufficient on this planet without support of others or coordinating action with others, which means we need teams to survive, tribes to survive. And the tighter our tribe, the more effective our lives. And so, of course, someone isn't going to be able to do this themselves. We didn't do this ourselves. We've done this with unbelievable amounts of support in identifying first our purpose, why we're doing it, coming up with some courses of action, some options for doing it, and then looking for the help and support to fulfill on that. And so this isn't something you do alone. This is something that you're going to need help for, you're going to need support on, which is, fully circles back to, the original question of what are we doing now? What we're doing now is systematically helping people reprogram their subconscious, reprogram their conscious, reprogram their mindsets in the effort to put their lifestyle first and create an environment that supports it.
That's an excellent point. I was just thinking about that. And when I was going through some of my hard years, I felt alone. Like I literally didn't have anybody that I could count on or even call and that I felt could help me with that. And so, you're obviously a big proponent of teams. You can't, thrive without them, especially in with the SEALs and the military. But, I've heard you talk about something called like a high functioning brotherhood. And so when you're talking about this stuff, it immediately I think of, like in the fitness space, right? I have a fairly large community. I have a membership community, and that's what it is, right? It's a brotherhood of guys working together and thriving within that. And it's incredibly powerful. And I've seen the power of what happens when you get a collective group together. And like you said, a high functioning brotherhood, it makes all the difference versus what a lot of guys feel, right? They feel alone. No one else is going through this. I'm stuck. I can't do this by myself type of thing. So when you put in that setting, right, things change.
Yeah. And you can think of it, I think and I haven't spent enough time to go back and diagnose where this came from, at least in our history and our society, our culture. But two things I see consistent, especially among men. One, when a man feels ineffective, he hides, he isolates. And I think it's because the ability to add value to the tribe secured your spot in that tribe. So anytime that we are ineffective, unpowerful, we're going to want other men not to see that because we don't want to be kicked out. That's my guess. It makes sense, right? So think of how bad that is. That when I need the help the most, I'm going to hide the hardest. That doesn't work well. And then the second one is being able to understand that our conditioned behavior is not us, right? It isn't us. Our behavior is a snapshot in time of us, but our behavior is going to change tomorrow. It can get better. It can get worse. And what I mean by better or worse is more effective, less effective, but it doesn't stay the same, right? We're not the same person in any second of our day because we have a new experience, a new neural pathway, a new subconscious choice, a new mindset shift. So we are in constant change regardless of if we think we are or aren't. What happens is that most of us are reactive to the change, right? What I mean by that is we change every day based on our environment doing it in a reactive manner. And what I'm saying is through some key lessons, through some strategies, some tactics. Ultimately, we're leveraging the same tools that I use to plan some of the largest missions in special operations history, right? We're using the same tools. I'm just saying, wait a minute, if I can plan to successfully take over the largest oil platform in the world that's rigged with explosives with 20 Iraqi special forces soldiers on it, why can't I plan for positive change in my behavior? Like, that doesn't seem to make sense. And I'm like, shit, it does. Like, when you actually use the same tools, you can change any behavior you want. And the last part is that and this is the one I'm not sure where this comes from, especially men, when they're confronted with a problem, they always go to what to do and how to do it primarily.
Yep.
And they rarely look at why am I doing it, or who do I need, or who do I need to be to do it, right? We never think of that stuff. We just want to solve a problem. We want to get to work right away. And what I'm saying is we need to reverse those things. If you want to be more effective, when you're confronted with a problem, a shortcoming, being stuck, we got to start with why am I stuck and why do I need to change? And then who do I need to be and who do I need help with in order to foster that change? And then what to do and how to do it, it becomes easy, like literally easy. It shows up, it becomes obvious. And so that last switch is one of, what you say, what would I tell Chris? Well, I'd start with, why do you want to change, Chris? What's your future going to look and feel like? What's going to be enabled if you do change? Do you really care about that? Next thing is, who are you being that's not going to live up to that future? And who do you need support from to live up to that future? At that point, what to do and how to do it comes, literally simple.
It's interesting because when you said that, I have a membership community and these guys are committed and they're paying to be part of this mastermind, right? But like you said, they start having issues. The first thing they do is withdraw, and I can't even find them. Like I reach out to them, nothing. And I'm like, well, what the hell's the point of you being here if you can't even respond? But like you said, like they're withdrawing, they're internalizing, but they don't want to share because they don't want to be ostracized or kicked out or whatever, is going through their head.
Any money, that's what it is. Yeah, shame. And yes. I think it all comes back to the tribe, right? Like if I'm a burden on the tribe as opposed to a benefit, when resources are limited, I'm going to be left behind. And that's why, we spent so much more time on this planet as cavemen than we did as in modern society, right? Like our modern society is literally just a little pinpoint on our overall timeline as a human being on this planet. So do you think we're more physically, emotionally, and mentally conditioned to operate in modern society or as cave people, right? With the fact that the human experience has been in the cave people sense a hell of a lot longer than the modern society sense. We still act like cave people. Right? We still act like resources are limited. We still act that if I'm not part of the tribe, I'm dead. And we still act that every threat that we come across can kill us. Right? Physiologically, if the phone rings and I see that it's my boss, I will have the same physiological respect or response as if it was a saber-tooth tiger that came through the door. Right? Physiologically, the same thing happens. The same internalized response happens if it's a phone call or a tiger. Because we ultimately are still cavemen in our minds, bodies, and DNA. So, of course, people withdraw from support in the effort not to be seen as a burden.
So your job or my job as a team leader is to have that conversation with them and saying, why is this happening? Who do you need to be to make changes? Why is this so important to you? Honestly, I haven't figured it out, and I struggle with it. I have guys that I struggle with drawing them out of this shell, and maybe that's what it is. I really didn't think about the shame that they may be feeling. I was just like, they just disappeared because they're being lazy or whatever, but that's probably not even it, right? That's
hell no. And on top of that, if you can make that shame and guilt that we all feel when we're in place, if you can make that be a connecting emotion as opposed to a disconnecting emotion, that'd be your first step. And how you would do that is to make it be something that is not to be hidden. If anything, it's something to be celebrated, because as soon as I see that it's shame, ultimately shame's one of the easiest things to deal with, because the only person that can make us feel shame is ourselves. So we are 100% in control of if we feel shame or not. Like, no one else can make us feel shame. So being able to connect on that and make that be something that's celebrated in the community. And what I mean by celebrated is celebrated when you recognize that I'm feeling shame right now. Like, awesome. Like, so am I. Let's talk about it. Yeah, you're not alone, man. Why are you feeling shame? You're creating that, and why is that enabling you to stay quote unquote safe even though it's damaging?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I hadn't really thought about it from that angle, but it makes a lot of sense, and will certainly change some of the conversations I have going forward with my groups. Wow. So, there's just so much stuff that I want to talk about.
Yeah, I know. Me too. I only got one of the three.
Yeah,
right? So we just talked, and that's why I started with subconscious, because our habits, especially in your domain and what you're what you're actually impacting on a great level with your community, that the subconscious and the habits are going to be one of the biggest hurdles. And so keeping in mind that our habits and our subconscious is driven by our neural pathways, right? The patterns that we've established in our brain and our environment, and that by changing our environment, we can influence those neural pathways and change them over time. That formula is going to, I believe, be hugely powerful for you and your community. So that's why I wanted to start there. Just to give kind of a preview of where we go from there is about conscious choices. So if we now can influence and re-engineer, reprogram our subconscious, now we get into conscious. And our conscious choices are driven by our obligations that we feel that we have and the commitments that we make to uphold them. Those two things drive our conscious choices. And being able to understand how to identify our obligations and shift the commitments, or focus the commitments on those obligations that support the lifestyle we want, is the exercise, right? That's how we change that. And the last thing is our mindset. Our mindset is that filter between conscious and subconscious. And it's the filter through which we experience our world, as well as the filter through which we respond to our world. And so that mindset is critical. It'll make you blind to something obvious, and it'll make you focus on something that's not there. So being able to understand what makes up a mindset and how to shift it, how to change it, becomes the last piece of the puzzle of engineering an exceptional life. By being able to put systematic focus, get support, and use hardcore tools to be able to reprogram our subconscious, reprogram our conscious choices, and direct and influence our mindset, enables us to create any lifestyle we want. And it gives us the power to start taking control of our environment and not being responsive to it.
Wow, I mean, a lot to think about, especially as, for somebody like me who, my business is helping men change their lives, right? It's not just, hey, do this workout program or follow this diet. It's, it's much more important than that.
You're doing this. And I would bet after, when you listen to this again, kind of probably do a little thinking on it, and then actually look at what is effective in your business, your membership, you're going to see how you're already doing this. You just didn't know you were. The only way you can be successful is by adhering, acting in coherence with fundamental principles. And these are fundamental principles. So I bet any money when you come back and reflect on this, you're going to start seeing it. Now that you know it, you can start doing it with intent as opposed to through accident, if you will.
Yeah, for sure. Just opened my eyes to some things that I hadn't really considered, for sure. And, we've been on the phone for a while, even before we started recording, and we haven't even touched on like 4 things that I wanted to talk about. We don't have time for it now. And I'm thinking maybe down the road, if you're open to it, I would have you back, because I want to talk about our kids. I mean, that's the big thing.
Yes.
And mainly, you teach a lot about confidence, which plays a role in every aspect of our lives. And I have 2 daughters, 13 and 10, and confidence is a huge issue.
Oh yeah.
And, it's something that I'd like to go deep on at some point, if you're willing, but such important, and not just for the kids too, but for us, your regular dad like me, confidence was never, I didn't have a lot of confidence growing up in myself. Like you were bullied. You went one direction where you faced it head on, and you got into fights, and you took a beating, and you had your arm broken. And me, I took the opposite path. I took the way of the coward. I cried myself to sleep every night in 8th grade. I avoided all conflicts.
Oh, I did too. So think about this. We were no different, right? So just because I approached it head on did not mean I didn't cry myself to sleep. I did, because it was just because I was confronting it didn't mean that it wasn't a negative experience. And confronting it didn't get me anywhere closer to where I wanted to be than hiding from it, because those ways are ineffective actions. Both of those ways, you're responding to your environment, right? For me, I would fight in response to what the others were doing. For you, you would hide in response to what the others were doing. So it is the exact same experience.
Yeah, but it's just interesting to me, because in adulthood, I hid because, by spending 10 years basically just moving around, not being known, not having any accountability or responsibility. And then you took the opposite path, right? And you went head on into the most difficult situation you could possibly go into, which is entering the Navy SEALs. I mean, it doesn't get any more difficult than that. So,
but wait for this, right? You and I ended up in the exact same place. Crappy marriage, self-destructive behaviors, and what? We ended up the same place. Exactly. Because again, I go back to responding to the environment. Yeah, our actions were different, but the fact that we were fundamentally 100% reactive to our environment meant that we ended up in the exact same place. And it wasn't until we started taking control of our environment, saying, I don't want to live this way. I want to live this way. And I'm going to start pushing and planning and reprogramming my environment to support it, that we started to see change.
Yeah, it's a good point. Interesting to think about here for sure. I definitely want to continue this at some point. I would just...
Yeah, I'd love to. I've got some just earth-changing, life-changing concepts, like core narratives around confidence that I'd love to share with your audience. And they are fundamentally applicable, because when we said what's the hardest thing for, quote unquote, Chris, what was the hardest thing for me is changing I can't to I can, right? Making the choice to make the change. And what's necessary for that? Confidence. You have to have at least better than 50% assessment that I can do it. And that's what confidence is. And so my approach to confidence is as a tool and to build it. It isn't a concept to me. This is a structural program where there's literally a recipe, a formula for producing confidence. And you can then, when you understand this formula, you can produce confidence in any aspect of your life. And then you can also create the environment to teach and condition your children to be able to do the same thing. So I'd be all over coming back to have that conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've got a lot to think about. I think the listeners do as well. So as far as what you do and your mission and your business, where do you want people to learn more about what you're all about and what you do?
Yeah, so I'd say first, who, right? So who can we help? And we can help all sorts of people. And really what we've been doing is taking control of our mind, saying, who do we want to help? And what we've been, the people that we can provide the best benefit to are individuals that are stuck, right? Are stuck in being responsive to their environment, generally married, similar to your audience, right? That middle age, the 30 to 55, and generally have kids. The other thing that we found is they've had success in business or in career, yet still are unfulfilled. That it has been the key. because they're stuck, right? It isn't because they're lazy, sit on the couch, smoking weed, drinking beer. They are doing, quote unquote, everything right, yet still are not living the life that they want as an individual, a couple, or as a family. And so though that's who. So if what we've been talking about has been resonating with you and you're in that domain, we can. And the way that we help is through virtual live, so virtual, webinar type training, live webinar training in specific courses that are set year-long in programs, as well as individual events, live events. So that's our core offer. And our core offer is enabling you to live the exceptional life that you want, create that exceptional life through reprogramming your subconscious, reprogramming your conscious, and by influencing and designing the mindset that's going to support the purpose and the passion that you have. So that's what we do, and that's how we do it. And the best way to get in touch with us is to go to www.plan, plan-site, sight.com/clarity. And what you'll see when you get there is if this speaks to you, you think we might be able to help you, we offer a free, what we call clarity session. So we'll actually take time live on the phone with you, either myself or my wife. And what we'll do is talk about what resonated with you and help you see how to implement it in your life. And we offer that only to audiences that we believe we can have a significant impact on. You'll also have the opportunity to download an ebook we have about high functioning teams. So it's the story of Hell Week for me and my boat crew. And we were one, at least in recent time, the only boat crew that I know of that didn't lose one member during Hell Week. And we won every single timed evolution for the 5 days of Hell Week. And the reason we were able to do that is we were an extremely high functioning team. And I break down what the domains of high functioning teams are, as well as the specific assessors, if you will, how to assess where you fall as an individual on teams, as well as where you fall, your team falls on that functioning level. So we will offer that as well for anyone that is interested. So plan-site.com/clarity.
Sounds good, man. I actually, now that you mentioned that, I really want to read that book. Well, yeah, this has been, please do. And this has been awesome. And I can't wait to dig into a couple of other things next time. And, I really, really appreciate your time.
Yeah, my pleasure, man. It's, like I said, our paths are unbelievably similar. What's amazing is even though we took completely different actions, we were on the same path.
Yeah, it's very interesting to me. Interesting stuff. So, yeah, I look forward to chatting soon. And thank you again.
My pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks for joining us. And remember, if you want more information, check out the Fit Dad Basecamp group on Facebook. And don't forget to stop by fitdadnation.com. Until next time, keep kicking ass and taking the next step. You can do this, Dad.